Hello, everybody. A very good evening to all of you. And I'm Sahajo from the Word Bookshop. And I just want to take a moment to thank all of you to making it for the event this evening and for being here. The weather has favored us today, so that's also great. So we're in for a session of poetry and conversation at the Pune International Centre. And just a little bit about them. The PIC is an independent, multidimensional policy think tank promoting the values of the Indian Constitution and the UN Charter. Its focus areas include national security, climate change, social innovation, sciences and technology, social innovation, um, economic reforms, urbanization, and of course, the arts and culture. So the arts and culture area is a fairly new addition to the PIC sphere, and Aarti Kirloskar is heading it. And since its inception, they have engaged the creative community of Pune in various brainstorming sessions and dialogues to determine and understand how this space can be used for the larger good of the city and its citizens. So a big thank you to PIC for hosting us this evening. And now it is my heartfelt pleasure to introduce and welcome a very well acclaimed poet, author, and translator, Mani Rao, who has joined us from Bangalore, especially for today's session. Um, over nearly 4 decades, Mani Rao has built a body of work that includes poetry, translation, and literary scholarship, which reflects a distinctive blend of lyrical intensity, spiritual inquiry, and intellectual depth. Maniji is the author of 13 poetry collections, including her latest, So That You Know, which brings together poems written across nearly 4 decades. She's also an acclaimed translator of Sanskrit literature from the Bhagavad Gita and Saundarya Lahari to her latest Kalidasa, selected poetry and drama. Alongside this, her groundbreaking study, Living Mantra, Deities, and Visionary Experiences Today, explore mantra as lived spiritual experience. After spending nearly 2 decades working in advertising and television across Mumbai, New Zealand, and Hong Kong, she eventually chose to return to literature and learning, completing an MFA in creative writing and a PhD in religious studies. A former resident at the Iowa International Writing Program, OMI Ledig House, and the International Poetry Studies Institute, Canberra, she has performed at major literary festivals, including Jaipur Literature Festival, Hindu Lit for Life, and Melbourne Writers Festival. She is currently working on a 4-book series with translations and commentary on select Upanishads. And you have a hat with so many creative feathers. It's really inspiring. Our conversation today will draw from all these caveats of her work and on her recent books as well, So That You Know and Kalidasa. And through them, we will explore the many subtleties that words come to hold. And I suppose there is really no better way to start our evening than to experience the poet's art itself. So please join me in welcoming Mani Rao ji, and I request her to give us a taste of her reading.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sahajo. Really delighted to be here. I'm going to jump into it right away. I will begin with 4 very short poems, followed by an excerpt from Kalidasa translation from Meghadutam. Begin with my own poems. The first set of poems is called This Marriage and That Marriage. This marriage. It's not too cold. I know. But I had nowhere else to keep this overcoat. All my suitcases were full, and my closet overcrowded. So I just let it sit upon my shoulders. That marriage. A haunted house, afraid to die. Echoes fold. Should the poem end there? The happy prince returns on the radio. Swallow, little swallow, will you not wait 1 night longer? next poem is called a 5-word poem. So I hope you will count. I always have to look because I forget. Those love cannot leave alone. Cannot leave alone. Love those. Cannot love, leave those alone. Cannot love alone. Leave those. Those cannot leave love alone. As soon as you start to read my poem, I start to feel fond about you. As soon as you start to read my poem, I start to feel fond about you. Do you believe in love? The small L, those little fires, much huddling, two tossed aquariums in an ocean. Love lies, all lies, lovelies, allies. मुस्काने झूठे हैं. And now, excerpt from Meghadutam. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the poem, but in Sanskrit it's a meandering rhythm. Kaschit kanta viraha guruna swadhikarat pramattah shapena stangamita mahima varshabhogyena bhartuhu yakshas-chakre janakatanaya snana punyodakeshu snigdha-chhaya tarushu vasatim ramagiri ashrameshu. Some yaksha who made a mistake was cursed by his master suffer one entire year. An ordinary yaksha, not a hero. When even a season's separation is unbearable, imagine 6. What mistake? Kalidasa does not specify. Some lapse of duty, same word for duty and right. Has the hero lost the reader's heart in the very first line? Heavy the pangs of separation from his beloved, his prowess gone like a sun that set year-long night. He lived in hermitages on a mountain named after Rama. Groves cool, waters pure, Sita once bathed here. Remember Rama, remembered Sita, remember messenger Hanuman flying like a cloud. Why hermitages in the plural, more than exiled, unsettled?
That was absolutely brilliant. I think we can all agree that was a very evocative beginning to this evening. And as I was listening to both your poems and the translation, I couldn't help but notice a very tangible presence of the commentarial voice that almost creates this dynamic of a group reading where it's the commenter, the book, and the reader. So, do you have something to say about that?
Thank you, Sahajo. That's a good observation. I'll respond to that in 2 parts. One is my poetry and one is the translation. See, in the poems, usually some poems have a perspective. Many of my poems have multiple perspectives. So there is, of course, there is the distance of time. And so when you retell something, there is a different point of view. At the same time, I want to capture the experience as well. So it could be, I was the baby who never cried, the snake on your breast who stung you dry. And it could be, time brings children. So there is like a collective voice and an individual voice and a dialogue, a drama that's created, and that creates the orchestral kind of effect. Or like in that poem, all lies, allies, lovelies, love lies. So the play gives you the different perspectives as well. So it's almost like there's a scene, and imagine there's a camera or on a trolley taking images of it from different parts around. And then the whole thing is edited into voices in my head. And so that's the technique that gives it that little different shifts of perspective. And the translation also, obviously, if I was translating like a novel, I wouldn't have the scope to give you that commentarial input. But the kind of texts that I've worked with, traditionally, of course, there's been the bhashyas. So if you look at Malinatha, you have, a traditional bhashya will have the words, the word breaks, the word meanings, the grammatical part, the anvaya, the prose order, and then the interpretation, and then maybe other contexts in which something has appeared. So there's a particular sampradaya for that, you know. But an anubad, on the other hand, is to speak after. It's not, so it's not, if you had to have a machine do a translation, then you don't have that commentarial perspective. You have interpretation, of course. So the commentary is more like an appreciation. It's to show the reader something that is not going to come through in the translation. For example, when I say swadhikarat pramattaha, and in the translation, of course, I differentiate between my commentary and the translation. So wherever there is commentarial input, it is either indented or it is an italics. So it flows like a poem, but you can still see what is Kalidasa saying and what is Mani Rao saying. So when I say swadhikarat pramattaha, I'm pointing out that when you say adhikar, you think rights, but actually the meaning is duty. So the complexity is that adhikara is the right of doing your duty. So what a foolish man that he had the ability to do his duty and he he forwent his right. Right? So there's a very interesting dynamic at play. And then when I say why hermitages in the plural, so I point out that ashrameshu, Ramagiri ashrameshu, why was it used in the plural? So it's more like an appreciation class going alongside, but it's not always the case. Or so, for example, if I say fragrant river Gandhavati, I could have just said Gandhavati, but I'm expanding the meaning to let the reader appreciate what the word actually means. So the commentarial input is a little bit different in style and translation, but I like to do that.
Yeah, it's almost like as a reader, you feel like you're in on something while the text is going on. So there is all these
Get
relationships
more, yeah.
that sort of emerge from just one reading, one that the reader has with Kalidasa, one the reader has with you, and with the text. So I really thought that was something absolutely brilliant that was happening there. And I think a lot of what
And I avoid footnotes completely.
yeah, which is great. Like you said, the flow that kind of comes through, it's just a very different reading experience, especially. And in both, it's not just the translation, right? So even to your own poetry, there's almost that dynamic. So I think right now when we were talking about this, I had this feeling that when it comes to Sanskrit texts and the language and classical literature, for a lot of the people who have not read Sanskrit literature and just know about it from outside, they find it very serious, very daunting. Always it's supposed to be grandiose and all of that. But when I was going through your translations, it was so flavorful, and there was satire and there was humor, and I was like, how come this is happening? And I just wanted to know if this is something you bring in, or
Hopefully, it's not extraneous to the text because that would be incorrect, especially in a translation. Nobody's buying it because it's me, they're buying it because it's Kalidasa or it's Saundarya Lahari or whatever. So in that, complete like a Rasabhanga would not happen. But what I believe that I do is I try to return to the text. And what happens is like centuries of habit has created some kind of crust or a deadening or a loss of the texture. And if I feel that, and of course that's my experience of that text, I will try to bring it out. I'll give you a couple of examples because that's some of the best way of illustrating that. Let's take the Gita, for example. Okay. Now, we are so used to listening to the Gita in a particular melody, and there's always like the second chapter, then the third chapter, and the fourth chapter. And this chapter divisions are very clear. We know this chapter is about karma yoga, that chapter is about bhakti yoga. So we have like all these compartments in our minds. And when people, like an example of a melody would be Dharma kshetre kurukshetre samaveta mamakaha pandavaschaiva kimakurvata sanjaya. No, that's okay. I mean, there's a sense of consoling kind of, it feels nice because you've heard it and you have certain ideas already in your mind about it. But really, when you think of the words, that's not, if I hadn't heard about it before, that's not how I would read it. All that, what has actually happened until then in the Mahabharata is all of this tension has come to a climactic point. And actually, how is that felt? Dharma kshetre kurukshetre samaveta yutsavaha mamakaha pandavaschaiva kimakurvata sanjaya. He's asking, what do they do? So the way that I translate that shloka, that stanza, is based on how I feel the drama. Also, what happens is often there's usually like a mistake that happens when you follow a certain habit. So, for example, there's another point in the beginning when Arjuna says, "I can't fight. I'm dropping my bow and arrow, etc., etc." And then Krishna says, you're just worrying for those who you should not grieve for them. Ashocyanan vashochastvam prajnavadamscha bhashase. And a lot of times the translation will say, you speak wise words, Arjuna. But is he saying you're speaking wise words? Prajnavadamscha bhashase. Literally, you're speaking wise words. But he means the opposite. So actually he's saying prajnavadamscha bhashase. The tone is actually the opposite, isn't it? So if you want to really catch the texture, I feel you have to read it like it's fresh. And I try to focus on that. So therefore, the flavor that you're feeling, I think, is coming out because of that, not because it's extraneous to the text, but it's in the text. It's just resurfacing. That's all.
That's a brilliant kind of way of also, it's kind of bringing the story also leads to these emotions. So it's not a isolated event.
So it is, I mean, there is a myth about the piety is a myth. I mean, the feeling is, before you even hear it properly, you're already feeling pious, But that is also true, but that's not all there is.
I mean, with the sacredness, there's a lot of other emotions that are flying. And it's right at the, beginning of an impending battle. So that's a really... so I remember reading your books and thinking there's just so much mythology embedded in so much of what you're writing, and not just Indian mythology, but also Greek mythology. You have an entire book of Greek poems and references to Greek mythology. And some of them even seamlessly sort of transition from Greek heroes, and then you have Indian heroes. And I remember thinking the fusion is so comfortable, it doesn't feel out of place. And I was wondering, just to your entire body of work, how does the mythological parts come
together?
Yeah, and how do you sort of span time, distance, cultures, and still feel so seamless?
It's just very natural, and I think it's particular also to our country. You travel in the north and you get into a bus and people are quoting Tulsidas. Okay? You come to the cities and they've not seen anything except the Ramanand Sagar version. It's in the same country. You go into a place and you pick up a matchbox and you say, "Arey, this is a retro design." But it's actually not a retro design. The printing ink is still like that from those printing presses that are still operating. So it's just a perspective of, is this retro? Or let's say you have a paneer tikka pizza. It's totally fusion. Or 2 years ago, I remember 2024, Diwali and Halloween came together on the same day. And so the kids are not only dressing up for Diwali, but they're also doing the Halloween trick or treat. So the thing is, all of this coexists. It coexists in our context, in our minds, in the literature we read, And so when we write, why should we compartmentalize? We should have Bhishma talking to Odysseus. Of course, because this is a war and that's a war. And when they are talking to us in our heads, obviously they're talking to each other. So yeah, I do have poems where all these characters are all just seamlessly just flowing in because they are in my imagination and I let them coexist. And I mean, may I read my Odysseus poem, seeing as it's like now on everybody's
I was
mind?
just going to mention it. I remember going for the movie and I was like, yeah, Arjun has got it. Like, I remember the conversation from the poem, so that would be great if you could.
Yeah. And then, it's also to do with language.
Hmm.
The thing is, we're so comfortable in, of course, English as well as there's other languages floating in our minds. So in Hindi, when you say up, I'm thinking, oh, you're many people. So there is a process of translation that happens automatically through these various cultures and languages. It's just very natural for us. So here's my Odysseus poem, or rather my multi-myth poem. It's called Fated, Feted, as in celebrated, and also the sound of fated. What does Odysseus do when the Odyssey is done? Memories, man, house on fire. The story ate it all. Back from Iraq, busy being a shape, a guard. Sleeps in the old bed, dines the old way. Visitors, none. The front hall scrubbed clean, all of Ithaca's young men chatting in Hades. It's all about the oil, they say. Finite fire. Odysseus, son of Laertes, father of Telemachus, husband of constant Penelope, family man, a long night, one half in a dream, the other half awake, thinking about it over and over again, of Helen, to the countrywomen, to the one-eyed scarecrow in the fields, said nobody. Another war veteran, Prometheus, dented, defizzed, rocket to space junk fell, wavered, washing ragged upon the crags, flooded by a moon, a startled thief. From the day he is engorged and cannot hide, till the day he is mute and will not show, in the shadow of the eagle he sees keeping watch, a luscious rested tongue and thirsts for it. Bhishma chooses when to die, after farewells, speeches, and a drink. Last man standing, Yudhishthira has a friend, a dog. The rest are soldiers, trees, armor, leaves, star tips. End of day survivors count spaces at the table, face down at the bottom of that trench, lots of hands and legs. A child minotaur, branded monster, thrown in a maze, expect a labyrinth, story. Alone, uncastrated, public object minotaur awaits a hero. We want a dizzying battle. Dodge, light-footed Theseus, minotaur thwarts, prisoner on D-Day. Arjuna retorts, what do you know, Krishna? What do you know, Krishna, what it is to be human? Infant on your knees, excruciating, waiting on teeth, from alphabet soup to the world, pregnant, determinate, uterus, milk in your breasts, sleeping, dreaming, 2 hands, 2 legs, breath, bowels, decrepit in the mirror. What do you know, Krishna?
Can we have a round of applause for that? That was beautiful. But um, I feel there's also a very apparent sense of contemporaneity in a lot of what you talk about. It feels like these are people that you know, that we can actually relate to. And I remember when I was reading the stage directions to some of Kalidasa's plays, remember thinking there's such a contemporary sense of being there, and even in the stage directions, it's not just about the translation. And that's something that you were choosing to do as a translator. And there's a lot of wonderful stuff that you say in your notes. And I thought that is definitely something worth sharing, you know.
In the Kalidasa plays particularly, like I don't have the your majesty or those kind of expressions, because I thought, how do we make this comfortable for somebody to perform today? The other thing is, what era does it actually belong to? You know, if you look at how would Kalidasa have thought of it? You know, in the first act of Malavikagnimitram, there are two characters who talk about what are we going to perform today, and the Sutradhar and like the assistant director, they're talking, and one says to the other, why are we, why are we not doing Bhasa and Saumila and Kaviputra? Why are we doing this Vartamana Kavi Kalidasa? You know, and then, of course, they proceed to do the play. The point is that Kalidasa didn't think of himself as a classic or as some uh, older kind of literature. He thought of himself as contemporary. Of course, everybody does. And in every era, everybody thinks of themselves as modern because they are breaking away from tradition or they're taking it forward. You know, similarly, so when we reproduce that, we have to make some adjustments so that it feels like he is contemporary. Or, for example, okay, let's say now Dushyanta is looking at Shakuntala and the girls, and they're adjusting their blouses, and he's basically peeking at them from behind a tree. He's really like a roadside Romeo. He's a king, but really he is that. And so when he bursts out and he says, "Hey, Sundari," it's not, "Oh, beautiful lady." It's, "Hi, beautiful." You know, he's being flirtatious, isn't he? He's, "Hi, pretty, hi, beautiful." So I use language that is natural for that emotion rather than my imagination of what the era is. And besides, I cannot ever know what it's like then. I'll end up writing something that sounds Victorian, which is also the wrong era for this, you know. So because we can never really know what it was like, and we all know that it's Kalidasa, so it's not like pretending to be something else. It's just refreshed. That's all.
It's like his wish, right? I wish to be contemporary.
Yeah, and also, for example, an attendant. You know, if everybody is an attendant, how many attendants do you need in the cast of the play? You kind of have to say. Or if it's Kanchuki, I just call them Kanchuki. Or how come Shakuntala is always called Shakuntala, but Dushyanta is always called king? You know, so these are small little details to really think about. Or if Dushyanta knows the name of the jester, why do we always have to call him jester? The first time call him Madhavya, the jester. After that, call him Madhavya because Dushyanta knows his name. So should we, you know. So those are all the things that create that feeling of freshness.
Yeah, it goes beyond just making it relevant. I feel like there's a certain reverence not only to the author but also to the emotion, to the content, so it all sort of ties in over there. And I think it would be lovely to see the play, you know, kind of happening on stage with this translation. I
We
think
did a dramatized reading of Megadutam, and actually, the couple of the colleagues, they want to do a dramatized version of some of excerpts from the plays also.
yeah, I think we should all collectively after this event push for this to happen here. But sort of tying everything together, like I feel like you've done such subtle things and also very important shifts without making it seem like, oh, it's just me. You know, there's of course reverence to the author, and in your own poems there is so much interesting stuff going on technically because you have a very visual language. It's not just about the poetry; it's about how it looks on the page. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that because you use visual text, you use different spacing, different fonts, different coloration for fonts in the same poem. And I was wondering if you could walk us through some of that because, and I feel like I should tell you at this point that having the book in your hand and reading it page by page is a viscerally different experience altogether than listening to it out loud. So there is always that.
You know, absolutely. How it's how I think that a book is an artifact. It is a material object. The other thing is it's black ink on white page. Yeah. And the black ink can be used in shades of gray. And so the loudness of the voice and the whisper can be communicated by the shade of gray as well. So a little aside or a comment can be in a different color, in a different shade, or even if it's black and white printing, you can still communicate that kind of texture and the pressure. The other thing is, why does all the text have to be on the left side of the page? The printing press happened like several centuries ago. We can put the word anywhere. The other thing I discovered, probably only around 2010, when I had been writing for a long time already, for several decades, I suddenly realized that, what do I need a comma for? There is a line, and a line is not a sentence. In a poem, a line is not a sentence. I've already gone to the next line. I don't need to say comma. And if I want to put a pause, I can just put an extra character space, and the person is anyway going to pause when they're reading in the rhythm. So I started using space a little bit more expressively and like more sensitively, I felt. And I therefore I the word sometimes the poems start moving on the page. And also I have worked with words as art artifacts themselves. So for example, in then much of this work was in when I was in Hong Kong. I did installations of poems as graffiti on the walls of the arts center, and as postcards and as window displays in restaurants and stuff like that, collaborations with artists. Some of all that work is here. So, for example, in this, you have this is from the Writing on the Wall exhibition. So, there are photographs of some of my artwork with the words themselves, and all of that is in this book. There is one book which is A3 size, and that is reproduced here in full, which was designed by me. It's like this, like black and white. It's just a miniature version of that other big book. So yeah, no, so it is a very visual book, and so it has more texture than just a lot of words. Yeah.
Yeah, I also felt like from what we were talking about earlier, in the process when you spoke about the commentarial, how it sort of comes to you also as a visual cue and that translates to that. So I thought this was a really novel thing that I have not come across that often. And I remember reading in a lot of reviews, Mani Rao's work is rule breaking. And I really love that. And it feels good. It feels fresh, there's no other connotation to it, but just you break the sort of the rule of the page, which is really cool, I feel. And I wanted to kind of bring it back to a reading because we've been talking for a while, and I feel like I just want to say here that I love listening to you read out your poems. I've been posting them on Instagram also, and you do lovely readings. So,
But I'll read a poem which is longer than an Insta poem, okay?
yes, please. I think all of us would enjoy
Okay.
a little bit
Yeah.
of.
So I wanted to read this poem because Priya is here in the audience, and this is actually a poem that she commissioned. She had an anthology called Divining Dante, and I was 10 days away from the deadline, and I hadn't written a single word. I was in Kashi, and so I cooked up this poem in 3 parts, and before I knew it, it suddenly sort of transformed into here's a journey. I thought, what do I know about the soul? I don't know anything about the soul, but I know something about the body. So I'm going to write about the journey of the body, or rather, the journey of the corpse. So instead of like, the purgatorio, the paradiso, inferno, I created a journey of the corpse. And so this is called Kashi Triptych. In this book, that's the title I gave it. Don't ask who's cooking tonight at Harishchandra and Manikarnika kitchens of Kashi. Shroud tears, skin sears, juicy fats oblation. Did marrow fizz, fire, laugh? In 3 hours and a half, this human log collectible in a dustpan. For the first time, I think to count your eyelashes to pluck them before they're singed. Of each I'll make a boat unmoored. Where in the worlds are you? As if I poured a sky of wax on you. Everywhere you are not, your exact absence. In Uttarkashi, where sun dives in pirouettes and fish roll their eyes, dodging tangled like doodles, we cup our hands and drink Ma Ganga, infused with arias of swans and undertones of glaciers. Sweetness rises, air floats, sinless. In Kashi, where shadows hover anxious like dogs marking corners of terrace ghats, as lovers drink mirrors, a curly suit rains upon the free bereft, and pundits claim ashes still warm from midnight pyres for altar coffers at dawn. Hey Vishwanath of Kashi, O Mount Alchemy, here I am, weightless. Now take me home. So long as mountains meditate, this river will be wet. So long as boatmen paddle a lullaby for the dead. Before sun strikes and water turns cold, we row to a spot churning upstream. Hand your ashes over to the current. Ash can't swim. Hangs on to algae on hulls, falls into arms of corals, scraped and bitten by fish, shat along gorges and flats. Why else do river beaches shine? What is mica made of?
Yeah,
I thought that we should read a tiny, tiny taste of one of the plays also from Kalidasa. This is from Act 2 of Abhignana Shakuntalam. This is when the jester Madhavya is talking. What a life! I'm sick and tired of being friends with this king who's addicted to hunting. We've been wandering from forest to forest, yelling deer, boar, tiger in the blazing heat of the summer afternoon, that too where there's no tree shade. We drink disgusting mountain water, bitter from gathered leaves. For the most part, we eat meat directly off the spit at odd hours. I can't even sleep at night, disjointed from hours hunting on horseback. And then, right at dawn, I'm woken up way too early by the din of hunters, sons of bitches, with a pack of hounds taking over the forest. The pain doesn't stop there. Think of a pimple on top of a boil. By my bad luck yesterday, the king, leaving us behind, chasing a deer, entering an ashrama, saw a hermit girl called Shakuntala. After that, he doesn't even mention going back to town. Even today, he opened his eyes thinking only of her. What to do? I'll look for him after he gets ready.
thank you for that. Yeah, I think we can open it up to some fresh questions from the audience. I'm sure they're waiting to talk to you as well. I just wanted to know about the mic. I think they're waiting for the mic.
I was quite intrigued by the poem that you read, where Greek mythology sort of moved into Indian mythology. I don't know if I understood. I mean, I knew quite a lot of Greek mythology, but I wonder if people see this movement.
I'm sorry.
Movement from mention of mythology in Greek literature and in Indian literature. This seamless movement from one to the other, that intrigued me quite a lot. But is it something that people will understand?
Nobody has ever complained, so I would
I'm
hope.
not complaining. I'm not complaining. I enjoyed it.
Actually, in that book is called Sing to Me, and it's all poems on Greek myths. I would say 80% of the actually more than 90%. They're mostly on particular themes and stories from Ovid and from Iliad and Odyssey. And so, like, it's one is about Helen's beauty, or something is about another legend. And this one is an unusual piece in the sense it just all the war stories get dragged in. It's just something that came organically. So I would just hope that if there's somebody else like me, they won't have questions. If they do, then they just have to look up all the stories.
Can you recite the best poem of Kalidasa? And also,
What?
and this is one question, the best poem of Kalidasa. The second one is when Kalidas goes to Sri Lanka at the invitation of King of Lanka, and he gets murdered because he completes one poem. The last sentence he tells the girl. That particular poem, can you explain?
Actually, we were talking about this just before the program, and I've never heard about this legend, sir. And as far as I know, there is just so much speculation about his life story. Nobody actually really knows for sure his biography, and there are more legends rather than facts. So I don't know anything about the last line of a poem, much less the story about him going to Lanka. But as far as there are different poems have got a different mood. Meghadutam is beautiful. It's a very Shringara Rasa poem, but also there's a lot of spoofiness in it because of the whole exaggeration and when you and I love the descriptions. The descriptions are just, for me, they're beautiful. Like, for example, when I read about the cranes in formation in the sky, like garlands on doorposts, for me that's so Indian, and I really connect and relate to it. I love it for those reasons. There are different reasons why I love the other poems. I mean, Raghuvamsham is also beautiful, and it's very strident kind of effect, and little complexity, very detailed complexity that you see in what goes on. The story narrative goes on very steadily, slowly. So different poems have got different aspects to them. But overall, I think the importance of Kalidasa cannot be underestimated, because he had such a huge influence on just the way we think of poetics today that we don't even know, we cannot even attribute why we think the way we do. And I'm sure that there are lots of strands that will find their sources back to his works. So, yeah.
Just to add to that, of course, I can't read the original, but in the translations, there are so many metaphors and visuals that come across that feel so new and yet just feel like, yes, they belong exactly in my, head. You'll be like, I can't even believe I didn't think of that. So some of that is so fresh. You're just like, wow, this metaphor could exist about something so simple and mundane like birds flying, like the one you mentioned. I've marked quite a few in my book. Just metaphors. I was like, okay, we can just
I'll
pick them.
give you another example. In Kumara Sambhavam, the third canto, which is translated here, I'll just read you one stanza, the opening stanza in the burning of Kama section, the Kama Dahana section. Suddenly, the 1,000 eyes of Indra turned from the 30 gods and fell on Kama. The attention chief space subordinates usually depends on their uses. The attention chief space subordinates usually depends on their uses. It's completely relevant to any time and any era. It's so telling. It's actually talking about the court of the gods. But the comment that is made is about power relations. It's fascinating, the insight into human behavior and emotions that are all over the dramatic works and the poems. Yeah.
Hello, Mani. I'm here. Hi, I'm Sonali. Welcome to Pune. I wanted to ask, there are two different versions of the Bhagavad Gita that have been in your name. There's one which is 2015 edition, I think, and one is 2023.
Sorry?
There are two different editions.
There are actually three. Yeah.
Okay. So what is the difference, and is it because you added something or you saw it differently?
Yeah. So the first edition actually came out in 2010. That was Penguin India. Then that they had some change of management or something, and then I had to find another publisher because that went out of print. That went into print on demand. Fingerprint brought it out. It was identical. The content was identical, but they added Ishavasya Upanishad translation to it because some difference needed to be there in the book, to create a different book. Fingerprint was, I think, went on for 8 or 10 years or something, and then when that went out of print, then HarperCollins picked it up. In the HarperCollins edition, though, what I did was I added a very lengthy introduction. It was actually what I wanted to publish have published as a book. I had written that entire section, that 50-page or 10,000 words or more, whatever it was. I had called it How to Read the Gita Again, in which I had put all my thoughts on how I felt that one could appreciate the Gita better. Not to read shloka by shloka, but to think of it in terms of vignettes and scenes, almost like mise en scène. And how to understand one shloka by looking at the context of what goes on before or after. Or how to listen to the sounds, nasato vidyate bhavo na bhavo vidyate. So how do you pay attention to these pairings, and how do the pairings illuminate each other? I had so many thoughts in my mind, having worked with the text all those years, and I had put it all down. And when I sent it to my publisher, he said, why don't you make this the introduction? I also wrote a section in it about how to decode the interpretation. Because if you read Bhaktivedanta's Gita is different from Chinmayananda's, it's different, and Mascaro is different. How do you know the difference, and how does, as a reader, you don't know which one to pick? And so I gave some of my own suggestions on that, in which I've talked about a multiple number of translations. So that is a completely new introduction. So this edition, is it here? Yeah. This one is the HarperCollins edition, which came out, I think 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. This one has that very long introduction. The rest of the content is the same. But this one doesn't have the Ishavasya Upanishad. But that's available online. I mean, you can just, if you type Ishavasya Upanishad Mani Rao, you can get it. It was in some journal or something.
I'm Arush Upasni, I'm a student at Ferguson College, Pune. Kalidas is often popularized as the Shakespeare of India. Do you believe this is an apt comparison? And should Kalidas be popularized in his own right, or is this an apt comparison?
No, I don't think it's apt at all. I think, but they probably don't really think of all the parameters when they say a phrase like that. They just mean that just as how Shakespeare, you can't have English literature without Shakespeare, or without the importance of Shakespeare in English literature, the importance of Kalidasa in Sanskrit literature, maybe that or in Indian literature, maybe they just mean it like that. But I don't see any other parameters that are similar at all. Also, any requests, if anybody wants me to read a particular poem or something, please tell me.
I mean, the comparison is really anachronistic. In that sense, between Kalidas and Shakespeare, it's a very anachronistic comparison. Anyway, I have a question. What is your opinion about the Rasa and Dhvani theory as proposed by
I'm
Dandi?
very attracted to the
By
idea of
Dandi.
Dhwani particularly. Yeah.
Proposed by Dandi. The Rasa and Dhvani theory as proposed by Dandi and its influence, eventual influence on Sanskrit poetry.
No, I think Dhwani particularly is of supreme importance. The idea of suggestion, the idea of vibrance, that is important not just in Sanskrit literature, in all poetry. In all poetry, for a poem itself, the idea of Dhwani is so important. As far as rasa is concerned, I find it a little bit limiting. I mean, perhaps during the whole Natya, in the whole Natya Shastra idea, there was, it is so linked to certain modes of expression and dramatization that we have that. But, we do have a classical model for it. And it doesn't mean that other hybrid forms of emotions don't exist or that there is nothing beyond that. Dhwani in particular absolutely just sucks me in the very idea. And I think it's without that, there is no poetry. But Dhvanyaloka is like such a complex text, It really needs a good translation, and a lot more people need to be reading Dhvanyaloka.
Hello and welcome to Pune. The first time I heard a talk on Kalidas's poetry, Meghdootam, was by one Dr. Bhave. He is no more, but he used to live in the Swargate area of Pune, and he was an orthopedic surgeon. But what he did was, he was also an aerial photographer. An aerial photographer. So he studied Meghdut, and he flew a plane from Vidarbha to the end of the journey, following the path of the cloud. Yes, yeah, to Kuber's land. And he photographed what he saw. What he was saying was, one of the most puzzling things was, how did Kalidas have this perspective? Because what he saw from the aerial view was what was described in the poem. But you could not get that perspective if you walked. There was one special mention of a river.
Gambhira.
Perhaps, I don't remember that. But it is described as the double S tilak, which is generally put on an elephant's forehead. Something like that. It's many years ago that I heard this talk, but he says even today, at the time when he flew, he could see that image. He was able to photograph that image. And this thing was the question he left us always. How did he have this? Was there some kind of astral traveling? Or what was happening? How was he able to get that view, which you can't? And
your guess is as good as mine, ma'am. I have no idea.
I was wondering, did you have that similar feeling?
Though it is fascinating. Actually, not even about whether it is Ujjaini and you're talking of palaces or Vidisha or all of could have been hearsay and all those things. But even if you really think about the view from there are no planes in those days. And he's talking about the view of the mountaintop. It's amazing how the imagination can have that aerial view.
Did you get that kind of feeling?
Yeah.
When you were reading for yourself, did you get that kind of feeling? That it's a different perspective?
Yeah, no, I was not that sensitive to that in the beginning. But yes, I have read other people's writings about how amazing all those aspects are.
Mani, thank you for this talk, especially also for mentioning the Kashi Triptych. Okay. I was wondering if you could read Thick. Thick, the poem Thick.
So the poem is called Thick, and I'll give you just a one-line context on it. I'm sure that what page is it, Priya? Oh, here it is, 31. I'm sure that you all encountered couples who are always quarreling with each other. But try getting in the way, huh? And you'll discover that they are thick as thieves. So this poem is called Thick. Thick. There comes a turn in the story of a pair of lovers when mirages seem mirrors and visitors notice how they now behave as one. Encounter them and you enter a jungle hallowed. Slow down, one step at a time, lift each foot by the knee. Find yourself in a clearing, bewildered by diversity. Space is an enclosure of trees, thick as thieves, roots tangled, branches locked. A weed strangles a bow, becomes a bridge upon a swamp where animated rot grumbles. What struggles and dies or survives, thrives, depends on what, who knows? They are the dervish whirling, and you, dust.
I think we can.
Thank you so much for
end on
coming
this.
out for an event to do with poetry.
Absolutely. And, just before we convene this session, close the session, I wanted to thank, like you said, everyone for not only coming here, but actively participating and just for your presence. Just a short note on the word bookshop. We've been a part of the reading community here in Pune for 30 years. We began with a very simple dream, which was to create a space for readers who loved books just about as much as we did. And over the years, the dream has actually turned into a community of mentors, students, professionals, friends, family. And we are not bound by transactions, right? We are bound by so much more, by our interactions, by our shared curiosity, and of course, a very precious love for the written word. And through events like this, meeting authors, talking to you
Thank you.
all,
Thank you so much.
we want to bring all of us, this community, together to talk, to have conversations about meaningful books, to share stories, and as always, welcome new readers into the fold so we keep growing. And all of Mani Ji's books are available for sale over there, so you can purchase them and you can get it signed. Also, you get like a personal talking time with her, so that's always great. Thank you so much for being such a kind audience.
Thank you so much, Sahajo, for all your enthusiasm and active participation.
Thank you all for being here today, and what a wonderful, wonderful reading. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us and the little nuances that you brought out through poetry. That was really great to listen to. I'd like to kindly request Latika Patgaonkar ji to come on the stage to felicitate Mani. Please. Latika ji is one of our senior most members at PIC and a founding member at that. Sahajo, if you could come for a quick picture.